Everybody has a story, and we aim to reveal the most impactful experiences of our guests that our listeners can learn and grow from. American Premium Vodka is a proud partner that helps make this show possible. Please enjoy this episode of the Blueprint Banter. I'll just start essentially by, I think the easiest way is to talk a little bit about like what your current role with Klein is and just like what your, day to day is. And then yeah, we'll just kind of go back to the beginning and
Okay.
And then we'll interject with personal stuff.
One thing I will say is anything we talk about or say, it's not Kline Electric anymore. It's Team Klein.
Okay.
Because we kind of rebranded a little bit just because of the fact that we're doing the HVAC and the plumbing.
Okay.
And other things. So
let's dive into some of that too if you want.
We've kind of tied it all together. Yes, we do electrical, but
yeah,
we're trying to make it all Team Klein. So
okay.
So not every day is the same for me. Obviously, some days are different. Some days are the same. But most every day, I have a routine of things that I do on certain days. Like I'm the department head for single family new construction residential, but I also get asked a lot of questions about other things within the organization. Not super deep, but other advice, so forth and so on. So that's my primary focus is the department that I'm in charge of, but overall, I really just care about the company and its success. So wherever I can jump in and help with advice or whatever, I'm all about it.
Yeah, you probably find yourself, as long as you've been there, you probably find yourself being able to lend help or lend a hand in a bunch of different areas, regardless if it's specifically like what your role is.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of times where people might already know what the answer is, but they want to hear it from somebody else just to validate it, And sometimes they think they know the answers, and then they ask me, and they're like, "Well, I wasn't really thinking that at all." So it's kind of a devil's advocate thing, Sometimes I get asked things because I'm very blunt and honest, and sometimes people need to not hear sugarcoating, you know what I mean? So, and I'm not afraid to say, "Hey, like, hold on, time out, take a break. We got to evaluate the situation, see what's going on." I know that everybody wants to jump in, dive in, but sometimes you have to just stop and think about things before you do it. And I'm kind of on both sides of that, We have done DISC assessments. Have you heard of DISC assessments?
Yeah.
So we did that for our entire company across the board. And I had never done that before, and doing that has opened my eyes to how to listen to people. How to listen to people, how you come across to people, and how they perceive you and stuff. And I'm I have a D personality. So I'm like, get it done, do it now. It's time to go, And there's a lot of people that are around me that are completely different than I am, who are like, they want it to be organized, they want all these things. And I want that too, but I want results. I want stuff to get done. I want it to be detailed. I want it to be all these things, but the ultimate goal is to get it done. So
would you say that, like, after going through that exercise as a team? So, I mean, for people that aren't familiar, essentially you're diving into the personality traits of each of the people, like, within your organization, no matter how big it is. And it does, to your point, it really helps you learn how to communicate, because if you understand it, it helps you not only be self-aware and sort of understand like how you may come across to other people, but if someone has a very analytical mind that you're dealing with, and you're more like us, where it's like, I just want action now.
Yeah.
They may need more details or more intricate way of viewing things, and so it really helps you understand how to communicate. But would you say that it was pretty eye-opening, like, for a lot of people that were involved with that part?
100%. I think that you hit the nail on the head with self-awareness. You have to know who you are, what you are, before you can even try to work with others, in my opinion. Like, you have to know yourself before you can teach anyone else or do things for other people. And that was a big part of it for me. Is I know that I'm here, but it's super important to me to flex to other people's styles, because I want them to understand that, yes, I want this, but I understand where they're coming from and what they need out of it to get to the result. You know what I mean? Like, we have such a vast field of people that work for us that it's super important to do that. And a lot of people don't really care, or recognize it. But I think that now that we're showing, I mean, we're talking about first year apprentices learning this when they're in school. We're doing disc assessments for them, putting a sticker on a hard hat so people can, okay, we understand that you have because you're more of the feelings kind of person. So we're going to talk to you different. We're going to treat you different. If you're a D person like me, I'm just like, here's the info. Here you go. So then that way you may think you know what the person is, but actually having that verification of who they are helps a lot. And it's kind of strange because one of our employees, she's actually our teacher now. She worked for me for 5 years. Her name's Kylie. She was one style, then she had a child, and then she did the disc again, and her style completely changed. Really? It changed because she became more of a nurturing, I think. Well, she's always been a nice, nurturing type of person, but it changed so much different from having a child to not having a child. So that's kind of cool how
your environment and circumstances can definitely, I guess, shift your priorities or how you prioritize. Yeah, that is interesting.
So
for sure,
that's a big deal.
Would you say, so I mean, with Team Klein, and to your point, like you're dealing with, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed in working with you guys and being around you is, there's companies out there that talk about culture in sort of like the team atmosphere and vibe, but being around you guys, you can actually feel it. And so, if that is your intent, and then you sort of have to operate based on that, right? So with the disc assessment and dealing with first year apprentices and dealing with people like yourself that have been at the company for a long time, I mean, are there, like, where does that want or need to make that all cohesive come from? Like, are those conversations you guys sort of have in the office of like, how are we going to sort of mesh all these personalities, or just what's that look like behind the scenes, I guess?
I don't think we have super in-depth conversations about it, really. My biggest thing is I'm not always going to be here, and not all of us are always going to be here, but I want there to be a legacy of our company, if that makes sense. I've been here for 16 years. There was 19 employees when I started, and now there's 400 and some, so I have a certain amount of pride in who we are and what we are and how we are perceived. Even though, my name's not Klein, I'm still an employee owner, and I still care a lot about, I guess, essentially what I helped build. So our biggest thing is we want these younger, because we have a very young pool of employees that work for us now. We have the older guys, but most of our employees are very young. Most of them have started with us, when they were 19 years old or whatever. They've gone through apprenticeship, and they're 25 now, and they're running work, which is pretty young to be having them as a responsibility. But we want to make sure that we're trying to mesh my style and their style together, so that way they can become the next level of management. Now obviously you're always going to have those individuals who they don't want it. Like I could go up and ask somebody who's worked for our company for 6 years and say, hey, do you want my job? And they would probably look at me and go, no, I don't want your job. Just because it's intimidating to be in charge of a lot of people, and some people just don't want to do it. Then you'll have the flip side of that where it's like, yeah, I want your job. But then that person is probably somebody who isn't really qualified to do the job anyway. They want what you have, not necessarily understanding what it takes to get that. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of it's building. We're trying to build a legacy, because a lot of us at the top tier levels of the management, we're very close in age, and we don't want the company to, I guess, just die when we leave.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a sharp fall off, essentially. Right. And if you have the right systems and sort of things in place. And I think that is interesting too, especially when you start, it seems like it's really easy for each generation to sort of look at the next generation as, these kids and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of nobody wants to work anymore. And there's always, since literally the beginning of time, the next generation is always going to be like the shortcoming of society, right? But
yes.
But I think it is interesting, there's a lot of companies and again, whether like big or small, often have like the same issue of who is going to sort of be the next role of leadership. And And to your point, not everybody is going to want to stay with the company forever. There's going
Right.
to be people that come and go, and there's going to be turnover. And I think a lot of leaders are scared to pour into people until, there's that certain threshold of time where, once you get to 10 years, now I'll take you seriously. And I think that necessarily don't believe in that. I think you do have to sort of pour into people right away. And I think it's neat that you guys do from the get-go, because you don't know who the next leader of that group might
100%.
be,
Yeah, I completely agree with. I think a lot. I mean, the generation ahead of me was always like, your generation's lazy and all these things. The same things that we say about the generation that's behind us, But the reality of the situation is every generation has different types of people no matter what. Everybody can always say, well, nobody wants to work now. Nobody wants to do anything. Well, no, the individuals you're finding don't want to work. It's not everyone. It's just individuals you're finding don't want to work. And the reality of the situation is if you teach someone to become a better leader, a better employee, just better all around, you find the individual who wants to do that, there's always more opportunity for people who are driven, so if somebody wanted to say they've grasped everything, want to do my job, I would love to teach them to do what I do, because then I can go to the next level, because I'm fortunate enough to work for a organization that's just wants to go, keep driving, we don't want to become stagnant, but on the same note, you're limited on what you can and can't do by your peers that are around you, but you can also work to build them.
Well, I mean, it definitely, companies don't become successful by accident. Companies like Team Klein don't grow by accident. They don't have a culture like you guys have by accident. And I think I really want to dive into that more, but let's go back to the beginning of sort of, your background a little bit.
Sure.
What made you interested in even becoming involved in this field? And just kind of go back to that, and then we'll segue through maybe some of that and learn a little along the way of how you guys got to where you're at.
So I'm a small town kid, grew up in a small town, had a paper route when I was 10. Ever since I was able to earn money to buy things and to get things, I've pretty much been doing it. So started off really young with work ethic and stuff like that. You have those times where you're 18, 19, 20, and you're kind of like, partying and doing all that stuff. But I've always had a job, done all these things. It's kind of crazy because, I worked at a restaurant, Hickory Park, for quite a while, all through the latter part of high school and then a little bit into college. And then left Hickory Park because I had a friend who went to go work for Fairway as a meat cutter. And I worked in the kitchen at Hickory Park. So he's like, hey, you should come cut meat. And I'm like, never done it before. He's like, teach you in a week. No big deal. You know what I mean? One of those deals. So went to go work for Fairway in Des Moines, which brought me to Ankeny because I was living in Nevada, working in Ames, or living in Ames, whatever, and started working at Fairway. Fairway, when I started working there, was kind of like the, you couldn't have facial hair, had to wear the white shirt with the clip-on tie, black pants. It was very structured, wore the little paper hat, very structured. And they had a kind of a program where you could work as a full-time employee, and then you could transfer from store to store and then work your way up and all these things, And I was like, well, maybe this is the path I want to take. I really don't have a super high direction on where I want to go. I had tried the college thing, did finish with like an associate's degree from.
Hey, good
GMAC.
for you.
Yeah,
I didn't.
nothing.
I dropped
nothing
out of
crazy.
community school.
I
so.
did welding and blueprint reading. Prior to Fairway, did that for a couple years. It just wasn't for me. I don't know why. It wasn't a bad thing. It's just I was young and didn't know for sure what I wanted to do.
There's a certain type of us out there, I think, that are just. For me, it was almost like an impatience. Like I felt like I needed to just be out producing, whether I was actually being productive or not. And I think I just had this angst when I was in school of I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. And that's not for everybody, obviously. But
I think a huge part of it for me was I didn't want to be stuck in this small town I grew up in. You know what I mean? And so leaving because I worked for a company in Nevada, welding. I was a welder. I build stuff, did all that stuff. And I just think that part of it for me was going to work for Fairway, and a Des Moines store was kind of like a way out of that small town. Not that I really needed to, but it was almost like, well, I'm going to go do this because I've got a buddy who works here, and I've never experienced really living out of this small town. And so I think that was a huge part of it for me. It's just a whole different, I guess, chapter in my life. So went to work at Fairway in Des Moines, and it was one of those jobs where it was a job, but I was kind of having fun doing it because I had a buddy that was there. We made friends with a couple other guys, and it was just, the store that I went to was the Park Fair Mall store, and it was just like crazy busy, balls to the walls all the time. Like you're just going. So like you'd have a 12-hour day, and you'd be like, it's done and over with because you're just working so hard and going so fast. So I did that for a while, and then kind of, I don't know if I really fit the mold at that time in my life to be part of the culture or the moving around from store to store kind of guy. I was just, I was still kind of young, still partying, still going out, just, doing dumb stuff you do when you're young. Yeah. And so, but while I was doing that, I happened to meet, she's my wife. I've been with her since 2000. I met her at Coconut Joe's on like a ladies' night, and just was talking to her for a while. And then her brother was an electrician, and she's like, and I'm like, man, maybe I want to do something different. Maybe this is the career. Cause went over to her house one night, and he had a brand new car, a brand new truck. Like he had all these things, and I'm just like, what does he do? And so she told me. And so I tried to become a member of the union. And they were just kind of like, you've never had any construction experience. You've worked at Fairway. You've been inside when it's hot. You've been inside when it's cold. I don't think we want to do this right now. Why don't you get a job for a non-union shop and then try again after you've done construction for a little while? And I was like, well, that seems kind of stupid. Like the whole point of an apprenticeship is to, start from nowhere and come to there. So I ended up getting a job for a non-union electrical contractor, Webster Electric. Did my entire apprenticeship through Webster Electric, ABC schooling and all that good stuff. Got an electrical license my third year of school, which just went and did it on my own, then came and brought the license to the owner of Webster. And he's like, how did you do that? I go, I just did it on my own. And then I go, the guys who are in fourth year, they don't have their license, and now I have mine. So let's talk about where we're going from here, Yeah. So I did that.
I mean, how old were you at that time then? Like mid-20s at this point?
Oh yeah, had my first kid when I was 25. I'm 46 now, not to date myself too much, but so I was probably 24. I'm trying to think here. I was 25 or 26.
So I mean that, somebody in their mid-20s to sort of take a program and have the sort of self-drive, nobody really pushing them that they had to get licensed, or I mean, you were still earning a wage and to have that drive on your own, I mean, that says quite a bit right there. And I think, not to go too far into a tangent, but that is sort of like the beauty of the trades world to me, is kind of like if you find something, Mike Rose says that instead of following your passion, you need to find something that you're passionate about. And I think, you didn't grow up as a kid saying, golly, I wanted to be an electrician or whatever, but I think at some points in your life, you have to find something that you're going to put your passion into and make it as good as it can be. And that sort of signifies that to me. Like, just, this is a direction I'm going to go. I'm going to hit it hard and go into it.
I think that for some strange, odd reason, that construction in general kind of did that for me. You know what I mean? There's a lot of fruits to your labor when it comes to construction and building things. And then I just focused, on the electrical side of it. Now that I'm older, it's more of just the project encompassing, Yeah. But yeah, I was there. I got my license. Basically, I wanted to be in charge of the guy who thought that he was in charge of me, because I wanted to have the license and be like, I have the ability to do this better than you do. In my mind, and I have to give kudos to my wife, because she's like the ultimate builder up. She's always just helped build me up and kind of say, hey, awesome. You're better than this, Not better than them, but better than this, And so she's always been my cheerleader. So, but then ultimately I organized into the union after I had a journeyman's license, and that was 07, 08, which was probably the worst time in the world to do that, organized into the union. My brother-in-law was in there. My wife's uncle was there. So they're like, just come over, it'll be fine. And then all of a sudden everything tanked. Yeah. I think the day that I was laid off, there was 32 people from the company that I was working for at the time that got laid off, like on the same day. Wow. And I was new because I had organized in, so I didn't have any tenure, whatever. I didn't have any sorority seniority sorority. That's what girls go to in school. So I was part of the layoff, which I was upset. I had 3 kids at that time, a wife, and I was like, this is nothing that I've ever experienced. Mm-hmm. I've never had an unemployment check, so that happened. And then about 2 weeks later after that, I just told my wife, I said, I can't do this. Like, I can't sit on the bench and wait for some company to say, hey, we need you now. Because number one, you don't know when that's going to happen. And number two, you're not making any money. So for a while there, I was just doing side work, doing what I could. Had a license. I had a small business insurance, so it wasn't like anything super bad. But I did that for a little while. Went to go work for another small company for about 9 months.
Was there a lot of people trying to moonlight at that time and just like get by? I mean, I suppose that.
I think that there was. I had prior to leaving Webster, I had formed another company with a buddy of mine. We weren't doing any direct competition with Webster. Yeah. Oh, I said Webster, but it is what it is. Did I say that before, that I worked for Webster?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They knew that I was doing side work. We just kind of had a common agreement, like, hey, don't ever estimate against a job for me, or if we do, because that did happen one time where someone was building a house, and we estimated it for them, and Webster estimated it for them, and they called me, and I was like, hold on a second. I told you if you had Webster estimate this, I couldn't do it. So I went and talked to Webster and said, hey, I'm not going to do this job. I don't want to take competition from us, all this crazy stuff. So I had started that prior to organizing into the union. So I did have kind of a client base, not a huge one, but just kind of word of mouth. So did that for a little bit. I just knew that wasn't going to had no health insurance, It's hard to start a business when you have 3 kids and a wife and you need health insurance. Now, not that it's not possible, and not that if you don't have enough drive, you couldn't do it. But at that time in my life, I was like, I got to find something different. So went to go work for a small company for about 9 months, very small, one-man crews, just wiring houses, doing service calls, stuff like that. Didn't really get along with the owner very well. He basically wanted to figure out a way to change but not change. You know what I mean? Like he wanted to change the outcome but didn't want to change the way to get to the end. And I'm like, so we just didn't see eye to eye on some stuff. And it was fine. Like, we weren't fighting or mad or anything. Yeah. And he just said, hey, I think it's best if, you move on and we move on. And I'm like, that's fine. And he's like, I'll pay your unemployment for as long as you want it. Not a big deal. And so left there, ended up going to, this was all still that 09, 08 time where the market was not very good. I mean, it just wasn't. People were doing stuff, but it wasn't very much. So left there and ended up going to work for Tradesman International, just randomly. They had if anybody doesn't know it, do you know what Tradesman is?
I'm not familiar.
So Tradesman International is kind of like a temp agency for construction.
Okay.
So you can, as a contractor, whichever kind of contractor you are, you can pay them a flat rate and to use their help. So you're not paying their unemployment tax or benefits or anything at all. Yeah. Tradesman's paying that. Yeah. So, and we've used Tradesman at Team Klein in the past as well. So
when you need to flex on larger projects and get people in short term, it makes sense.
Yeah. So if you have exactly. If you have a huge project and you need 10 guys and you don't want to hire 10, maybe you already have 5, you could get 5 from that temp agency. And if they're good, you have a contract where, like, after so long you can hire them. We have quite a few guys that work for us right now that started that way, and then now they're our employees. I mean, I would technically be one of them. Yeah. So, worked for Tradesman, went to go work for Tradesman, got a phone call, on a Friday, 2 days after I interviewed with them and took their little test of knowledge and stuff like that, and said, hey, we've got a place for you to go on Monday. It's in Des Moines. And I'm like, what contractor is it for? They're like, it's for Kline Electric at the time. I said, okay, cool. I knew of Kline Electric and I knew of Shane Klein just because I had friends that he worked for Tesdell for many years, and I had friends that worked for Tesdell, and just kind of knew the company. Didn't really know anything about it. Didn't have a clue what they were about. Just knew they were an electrical company. I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
It is what it is. Try it out. So went to the first job for them, which was a remodel on Park Elementary. You know where Park Elementary is in Des Moines? Kind of on the south side. Okay. Right on Park. It's an elementary school there. And there was probably 10 of us there. 10 people in general, You had your foreman who was there, and then a few of us tradesmen people were there. Pretty big job. It was a summer-long job. Then when school starts,
Is it west of like Fleur MLK?
It's actually east of. So, hold on a second here.
Not that it matters big time, but I was trying to think like where Park intersects that. And then,
Park Avenue runs east and west.
Yeah.
And then Southwest 9th.
Okay.
It's east of Southwest 9th.
Okay.
Kind of over there. There's a hardware store, I think, that's directly south of it, like an old hardware store right there. So
your first job is on a remodel over there.
First job is on a remodel of an elementary school. And, it's got a timeline because school starts. So you've got to get all this stuff done. And it's just, I don't want to say chaos, but we're really trying to get stuff done. Throwing people on there, throwing bodies on there. And I'm just like, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm just here to work, And so I was helping another older guy who was also there through Tradesman. We were rebuilding like the service for the building, basically. Something that, technically speaking, probably a temp person wouldn't normally be doing, that magnitude of stuff. So we were doing that together, and was up on a ladder. And at the time, the guy who was in charge of the commercial department showed up, and he's like, hey, what's your name? What do you do? Blah, blah, blah. And told him all that. He goes, why don't you just come work for us full time? And I'm like, well, we can sit down and have a conversation about that, and we can go from there. So I ended up sitting down with him, talking to him. We got negotiations and all this stuff. Well, then I called Tradesman, and they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm going to go work for the company full time. And they're like, well, what are they offering you that we can't? I'm like, vacation, paid holidays, company vehicle, all these, the list of things. And like, okay. Well, apparently I didn't know this, but there was some kind of a contract that they weren't supposed to be able to do that. But I just told him, I said, well, I'm just going to quit. If you don't let me do this, I'm just going to quit anyway.
I'm sure there's some gray areas as far as like who solicits the conversation and if it's driven from you and whatever. But
I had never worked for a temp agency situation in my life. So I was just like, I don't care.
I worked for Express or through Express before I got hired on full time at the factory job I had after high school too.
Really?
So kind of a similar-ish scenario, but yeah.
In my mind, I was like, I don't care what you say or what we're gonna do. I want to work for a company again. I don't want to bounce around and do all this different stuff. So, went to work for them full time. Ended up finishing that job as a Klein employee. It did drag on a little bit into the school year, so we'd have to go work some weird hours, like really early in the morning or late at night to try and get the stuff wrapped up. So
would you say that a large part of the reason why you were an attractive hire was because of your demeanor and sort of attitude of just put me on something and I want to work? Like, instead of just showing up and saying, well, this isn't my job, I was told to do this. Or,
right.
Do you think that that's a large part of why you were an attractive hire at the time?
I would say yes. I think a large part of it was just the fact that, I think the willingness of just whatever. At the time, the motto of Kline Electric was whatever it takes. That was what was on the bottom of like the stickers and stuff was whatever it takes, And I was just kind of like, whatever it takes. If you need me there at 4:00 in the morning until 6 a.m., whatever it takes. If I got to lay on a creeper and go through a tunnel to run conduit, I'll do it. I didn't. Do you want to do everything? No. But was I willing to do it? Yeah.
See, I think, and I don't want to necessarily take too much time away from the timeline of your story, I guess, but you know, I think a lot of that comes from, it's different from person to person, right? And sort of your experiences shape maybe some of that demeanor. And when you've gone through being laid off, you had the time on the couch, so to speak, not that you were just like sitting around, but, or on the bench, I guess the term would have been. Not like quarterbacks when they're in free agency, but like when you're on the bench and you had that time. And so you know what that's like, and you definitely don't want that. And so the alternative of maybe having to work weird hours around a school timeline isn't near as bad as that. Right. And so I guess at the end of the day, that's perspective. And I think what is really hard from a leadership standpoint is if you've gone through that personally, you know and have that experience with you. But if someone that you're trying to lead hasn't,
right,
then it's really hard to get that buy-in sort of with that saying, you know what I'm trying to get to?
100%.
And so I'm just curious, I guess, having gone through that experience and literally the team motto being whatever it takes. I mean, at Showtime Homes, that's kind of the same like feeling, or I'd like it to be, but it is hard to get through sometimes to other people that maybe haven't not had things. If that makes sense.
I would agree. And we'll get off the subject a little bit here, but not a whole lot. But I would say that that's a huge hurdle that we have as a management team, within our organization, is that a lot of the young individuals who work for us have never seen that. They've never, let's be honest, ever since, the crash of 08, 09, whatever, things have been okay. Obviously
recessions, but like
everything's been pretty good. So a lot of these individuals who work for us have never experienced, okay, we're going to go a couple months here and we don't have any work for you to do. So you might be laid off, but we want you to come back. Well, in their mind, they're like, well, I'm not, I'm here, I need this money. I need these things. And we're like, yeah, we understand that. But that's kind of how it was for a long time. And so they don't really have that. And so it's frustrating as a leader or as management or have dealt with that. And then the feedback that you get from these individuals, if you have those conversations, is kind of like, it's the end of the world, but in your mind going, but it's not really, because we've all been there and done that. Not that I want it to happen, but there's always that chance of that happening, So yes, I would say that having experienced those things, and you can see it in other individuals who've been in the same boat, that work with us or even work for other organizations, if they know what it's like to not have, when they have it, they are putting their full effort forward. And that's just where my mindset came into the situation was, I want to do the best that I can so I'm an asset and I have value to this team. We weren't really Team Klein or Team Kline Electric back in those days. It was more just like Kline Electric. The logo might have said, no, I don't think it said team, but I just wanted to be valued so that way I had a place, and not that I didn't have value or a place when I worked for Webster, because I kind of did. We had we had a bonus structure, and each month you got a bonus, and I qualified 9 out of 12 months for the highest producing employee. I think in my mind, I was chasing that dollar. The union was paying more than Webster was going to pay. So I chased that dollar because I thought that was the right thing for my family at that time. And always, hindsight's always 20/20. Yeah.
Well, I think obviously you guys are, Team Klein now as it exists is a much more polished and refined company just altogether.
Oh, yes.
And I sort of want to hold on to that a little bit as you continue your story and get into more of where you guys are now, because I think it's extremely powerful. And anybody that's listening that maybe runs their own company or is a leader in a company or is trying to work their way up through a company, I think it is interesting how we sort of set a path forward that people can excel and move up and be valued, but also like it's reciprocal. And it's not always just from the company down, it's also from the employee back. So we'll touch on that some more as you get later on in your leadership roles with Klein.
Sure. So stayed at the Park Elementary job, left that job to go do the first ever hotel that Kline Electric had ever wired, because they knew that I had kind of a vast background on residential and Romex and things of that nature. And so I left the park job basically when it was done. I think that the foreman stayed and closed out a few things, but I stayed there for most of it. Went to the first hotel job, and it was literally all hands on deck quite a bit. Saturdays it was Shane Klein coming in, working and operating a mini. I'm helping work on stuff. We're all working together as a team to try and get stuff done. Our senior commercial estimator, his name is Monty Evans. He was the foreman of the job at the time. And I had never worked with Monty before, but then I started working with Monty, and I'm just kind of like, this guy gets it. Like I liked working with him in the field because we were both very like driven and like, let's just get it done. He's just like, you know what you're doing? I'm like, yeah. He's like, go get it done. There was no like micromanaging. He was just like, let's just do everything we can to get this done. So worked on that job. Basically, I ended up staying and closing it out, finishing out that job, and worked on a couple other commercial jobs, and then had a brief moment there where I was like, is this the right fit? Because I didn't feel like I was getting exactly out of it what I wanted out of it. There was, I liked it, and there was growth, but I had a buddy who worked for Des Moines Waterworks, and he's like, I think you should come work for Des Moines Waterworks and be a service guy for Des Moines Waterworks. And I go, I'm an electrician. He goes, it doesn't matter. Like, they don't require any kind of a license. So for a very brief, small, I want to say 1 week, maybe 2 week moment there, I thought about going and doing that. But during that time, basically a mass text was set out. I think there was maybe 25, 30 employees at the time. A mass, and this, mind you, this all is happening like in a 2-year time period. Pretty short, tight window. A mass text goes out saying, hey, we want to start a service department. Is anybody interested in becoming a service tech for electrical for Kline Electric? Well, I'm like, duh. Like I was, that's technically what my buddy was trying to get me to come do for Waterworks anyway. And this isn't a field where I feel like I have more knowledge than I would of that. So I'd be a little more comfortable. So I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I want to do it. I don't know if anybody else applied to do it. I have no idea. I'm not sure. But I talked to, Shane and the people that were in the management team at that time. There wasn't very many, like maybe 2. And said, yeah, I'm very interested in doing this. And I'm like, okay, perfect. That sounds great. The pay, the van, all that good stuff. The gentleman who had been doing service work was on vacation, and he came back from vacation and said, you're no longer employed here, and basically handed me the keys to his van and said, here's your van. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know it was going to go down quite like this, but so I started doing service work for Kline Electric, and then Shane Klein and Zach Bolin, was the vice president at the time, they went and took a trip to Florida together.
I've heard about this trip from Shane before, and it sounded like that was kind of a Renaissance time period. But
it kind of was.
Yeah.
So they took a trip down to Florida and basically said, hey, while we're gone, you're going to field all the phone calls. Basically we're going to be gone, and whatever needs to happen, the commercial, the department head for commercial was still there. There were still people there, but they were just kind of like all the issues that come up residentially, multifamily, whatever it may be. We kind of need you to just figure it out and take care of it. And I'm like, okay. And so they were gone. Phone calls came in, issues arose. Yeah. We took care of it. We got it all figured out. Now, some of it was kind of crazy and wild, but we got it all figured out. They came back from this trip and basically said, hey, we have an idea. And I'm like, okay, what's your idea? And it started off as quality control. They wanted me to do quality control for residential. Not so much commercial, maybe a little bit here and there, but I would say 99% was residential. And I said, okay, what does that mean? Like, tell me what your guys' thought is. Well, we were having a lot of issues with, we were doing residential work, and it would get about 98% done. And then we would say it's done, but it wasn't done. Or it would be done, but something wasn't right. Something was broken. Something was bad. Well, so our customers would have to call and say, hey, this is wrong. This is bad. This needs fixed. Basically, why would you want that? They
were lacking some sort of systems or structure at the time, probably.
Yeah. And so I said, that's fine. Wasn't perceived very well from the field employees in the beginning, because I wasn't like I was kind of the new guy still. I'd only been there for maybe a year and a half. Like I said, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And so what I was doing basically is going back to everyone's jobs and making a list of things that they needed to fix or things they needed to change. And I was doing service work at the same time still. So I was kind of balancing both. And I'll never forget this. I was at someone's house changing out their panel, doing their service, and get a text message on my company phone. One of the foremen at the time for the residential had set up a mass text and did not realize that I was in the mass text. And he says, I have a great idea in his text. Those bracelets that say, WWJD, which is what would Jesus do? He goes, we'll get some. It'll be, what would Jarrod do? Because he did not like me at all. Because he made a lot of mistakes, and I kind of called him out on it.
Yeah, and if you have a culture in a way where guys are sort of used to just doing their own thing and getting away with things to a certain extent, and now all of a sudden there's somebody creating some checks and balances, there's that natural rift there. So,
and I replied back and said, that sounds like a great idea. It would save me a lot of time fixing all your fuck ups. I replied back, and I'm like, I don't care. Like the president of the company and the vice president of the company are the ones who want me to do this. Right. You can say whatever you want. I'm not here to be your buddy. I'm here to help build this business,
It's also interesting just to speak to that too, because there are a lot of times where in companies, and sometimes it's sort of a lateral move where it's just somebody checking on somebody to make sure something's getting done. It doesn't always have to necessarily be top down even.
Right.
But that there's personal feelings that get involved with some of that. And really at the end of the day, what is the goal of the company? The goal of the company is to wire homes correctly and to have clients that are happy. And really that's all you're doing. But it is interesting. I don't want to say it's funny, but it is interesting how that can be taken like at a personal level from time to time and kind of cause those rifts between people.
Well, I just think it's crazy that you want to do subpar work and not do the job correctly. But then if someone calls you out on it, you're going to be mad at them for it. You know what I mean? Like that's not their fault. That's your fault.
I personally struggle, and I want to talk about this a little bit just because it is kind of interesting. I personally struggle sometimes with my demeanor and the way I come across can be more brash, and when I'm talking about things we need to do better or be better at, all I'm thinking about is the end, that the client is as satisfied as they can be. But the way you go about that can be polished or, kind of back to the DISC assessment thing. I need to do a better job of thinking about who I'm saying that to,
right?
And so that they don't take it personally. But anyway.
Well, at this time we had done no DISC assessments. Yeah. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, a little more crude, probably.
We were just kind of like,
yeah.
It was the wild. I mean, I don't want to say the wild, wild west, but we were just kind of like, no, like this is the old school, old man mentality. So I did the quality control thing and was doing service at the same time. And then they recognized that maybe that was just too much for one person to do. And then we brought on Billy Wheeler, who's still our service, the department head for our service team. And Billy and I worked together, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 weeks, just together so I could show him like, this is where the jobs are. This is the stuff that's going on. And he basically took over the service role at that time. And then I became essentially the first project manager for Kline Electric single family residential ever,
Because Klein got started mainly with commercial, correct? Is that where that was?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Back in the day, and I wasn't working for Klein at this time, so I don't know all the details and facts, but I know that I don't want to say just commercial because Kimberly Homes had a pretty good presence within Klein at the very beginning. But they did do a lot of commercial work for like Hy-Vee at the time. And they were doing residential. I don't think that the residential department was, carrying a lot of the weight. I think that they were just doing it because it was kind of the starting point with Bill talking to Shane about, starting an electrical company. And then I think that Shane organically kind of got involved with Hy-Vee. And then so Hy-Vee kind of took over as far as the big shiny thing to do with Kline Electric. And then the residential was always there, but it was kind of on the backside,
Well, and I bring that up because what I think gets overlooked sometimes is when a company makes a shift or adds on to their service offering or whatever that looks like, oftentimes that means that there's a human that then has to be an integral part of that. And
Right.
obviously, as they continue to get more into residential, I mean, you were one of those integral pieces that sort of, because if the wrong people are in place or if they don't have somebody that's overlooking to make sure things get done,
Right.
that side of the business could fall flat on its face faster than it got going. So,
Yep. Yeah. In the very beginning, Zach Bullen was, he was in charge of the residential side, and Shane was the owner of the company, but really focused pretty heavily on commercial stuff. We had a commercial estimator and other commercial tier level peoples that were involved in it, but he was pretty involved with that, and Zach was mostly involved in the residential side. So, when I was a project manager, or the first project manager for Klein, Zach was, my department head, my boss, and us together just kind of just tried to figure out better ways to do things, more processes, more refined ways of doing things on how we do things, and more keeping things fluid, keeping things consistent. Consistency wins races. That's the fact. So we just kept evolving things. We had a really, I mean, Zach and I were probably, he was probably my best friend at the time. Like, we became very close, very friendly.
you're in the trenches together.
We were in the trenches together. We understood each other. We've evolved and changed a lot from then till now, and we have much different roles within the organization. But at that time, we were kind of like the yin and yang of the two. He was the puppet master, and I was the puppet, and then I had the puppets below me, and we were just kind of idea after idea after idea after idea. And it worked out really well. I think that when they first were doing residential, I don't know how many houses they were doing a year, maybe like 20, maybe. I know that before Zach took over the residential department, there was someone else in charge of it, and it was, 3 or 4 houses a month. Wasn't anything crazy at all. Once Zach took over and I became in the project, and there's a lot of different things as a project manager then versus what they do now, because it's evolved so much. But I think our first year we did 76 houses, which of me helping, which in my opinion at that time was like, we're killing it.
Yeah.
Like we were killing. We were doing a really good job at 76 houses for the year, in my opinion. And so things were going along, going at a good pace. We were doing remodels within the office, trying to figure out more people in more places, just ever evolving. From where we were to where we are now, it's just been such an evolution of processes and change and, growth. And if you want to grow, you have to change.
Well, what I think I love about your guys' team is the fact that it still feels that way. Like it's literally still tomorrow. How do we get better? And you guys haven't lost that part. So that's neat for sure.
Yes. Sometimes I'm kind of on a certain level with certain things that I do. If it's not broke, I don't want to fix it. But I want to be able to know that piece and that part can grow with our growth. That it's not something that we have to completely change, but it can just organically grow with the growth. So Zach and I were doing our thing. Commercial was doing our thing, and I'll never forget. We had at one time it was the theater showroom at the old shop prior to me working there. Then it became Shane's office, and then it became our conference room. Because as you grow, things change. So we're in this conference room, and it's like the management team's in there, and I think at that time there might have been 5 of us, maybe 5 managers, and Shane's standing at the top or in the front, and he's like, so the bar has officially been raised. We have to bill this dollar amount each month, to maintain our business. And that dollar amount is so minuscule compared to what we're doing now. You know what I mean? And so in my mind, I always go back to that and think, we thought we had made it. Like, we thought this is the pinnacle. This is what we need to do. As long as we do this, everything's going to be great. Well, one department of our company has that much revenue per month now, not the entire organization, Right. So, and I'll never forget that, just pinnacle point at the company. And then we hit that, and the next month it's like, oh, now we're going here. We just kept going up and up, and it was very it was just super organic. We weren't really pushing the envelope. Now I was that guy that's out there hitting the talking to builders, challenging everything.
Yeah.
I always wanted us to wire every house in the state. I mean, that's just how I felt at the time, and we started doing it. We started the business started to grow. A lot of our existing customers that we had, and I'm speaking just residentially right now because I don't know. I know enough about commercial to know that we've grown and done all these things, but residentially speaking, I was hands on. So a lot of our customers we had at the time were growing, and then I was picking up new customers, finding new employees, growing and growing and growing and growing, to the point where it was like, okay, now we need 2 more project managers to assist Jarrod. Maybe Zach shouldn't be in this role anymore. Maybe we put, we'll put Jarrod into this role, and then we'll get 2 more project managers to replace him, and then we'll hire an estimator. Because I was doing, in the beginning of all these different phases, one person always wears a bunch of hats. Because you don't know how much work there is for that one individual part. So, I was a project manager, and then I was also at one point in time the department head and the estimator, because Zach was doing the estimating and doing the invoicing. Well, then I took that part over, and then they brought more project managers in because they wanted me to be the department head. And then now I have an estimator, now I have admin, now I have 3 project managers of my own, and I'm in charge of it.
Isn't it funny how you find yourself in this position where all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm running out of time to do these 5 things. This one I'm not really the best at. These 3 I'm really good at. Let's find 2 people to take these off because I'm not the best at those. And it is interesting when you find yourself in those moments. It's like, oh shit, I can't keep up anymore. So
I think that I think on a side note to that though, it's always good to know what the person's job looks like because you've done it. Right. You know what I mean? All the way from being a first-year apprentice to where I'm at now. I know the estimating part of it, the billing part of it, the project management part of it. That helps me relate to those people and not just be like, why aren't you done? Well, I know why you're not done. You have too many things to do, and we need to prioritize a few things, So
I will say, on the contrary to that, because I've struggled with that a little bit within our team at times, like with Alex, our lead designer on staff, like, I don't have a design background. So,
sure.
So then it comes from a lot of questions and just, well, what is it that, like, where's the headache coming from? And then like,
right.
How do we go fix that? And it is tough if you haven't been there. It's much easier in areas of the, like the job site cleanliness stuff. Well, I pounded nails and like, I'm familiar with that. So,
right.
So I can understand that better. But yeah, when you haven't personally been there, it's a lot tougher from a leadership standpoint as well.
Yeah. But I completely agree with you. I mean, if you don't know, pick somebody's brain. Because a lot of times when you do that with people, they're going to view it one of 2 ways. They might get frustrated and like, just leave me alone. Or they might also be like, oh, this guy actually cares about what I'm doing and appreciates what I'm doing and wants to know. So yes, I will talk to you about it. That's the why, I guess, is what I would say. So I lost track.
So you guys essentially you're at that cusp of you're figuring out like sort of what the bottom line needs to be, and then you're in full growth mode, kind of going from there.
Yes. So throughout the evolution of the things, Zach and I are trying to figure out the processes. We're doing more and more houses. We're hiring more and more people. Everything is going good. I mean, it's good, but we went from 76 houses to I think 300 houses like in 2 years. Oh, wow. And then we went from 300 to like 500. It all just started growing. I mean, in 2021, we did 1,294 houses. Wow. That's addresses, single family addresses in 2021, and
literally closing out like over like 3 per day.
It was
not even business days, I guess.
It was
like
insane
4 per day.
In 2020, obviously with pandemic, crazy. Interest rates were down. Everybody wanted to do 1,000 things. So 2021 was like that. At the end of beginning of 2022 or the end of 2021, I don't want to say that I snapped, but I kind of snapped. I kind of lost it. I was kind of like, I can't continue to, because it was a lot. You know, I was burnt out. I was really burnt out. I had lost my dad in 2019, which we weren't like super close, but for some strange reason, it's almost like if you weren't close to your parent, it's almost worse than if you were super close. I don't know. It was weird. So I kind of went through a lot of personal growth, was looking at a lot of things within myself and recognizing what I needed to look at, correct, change to become not only a better leader, an employee, but just a better person in general. So I just talked to Zach and Shane and said, I can't continue to work this way. Like it's just nonstop, go, 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 which I love pace and I love doing all that, but it was just too much. So we didn't really, and the economy kind of forced it to happen too a little bit. We had an account that they do a lot of houses. They do the most houses in America each year. And they basically wanted us to do every single house for them, which was going to be about 800 houses a year for just them. And on top of our other customers that we had, been with for a long time, or new customers that we had acquired. And I just told them, I said, I think it's too much. I think the expectation to do all that with the workforce we have and everything that's going on, I think we need to have a conversation with them and say, hey, we completely get it if you want to, have somebody else step in. I didn't want to do that. I don't want to say that I felt like I failed, but I kind of felt like I failed. You know what I mean? Like I felt like there was, this huge amount of things we could do.
When you're in the trades world, you have this sort of, I don't want to necessarily speak for you, but I think there's a lot of us that have this I can fix anything mentality, or like there's nothing that I'm not capable of, right? And people always say there's a lot of power in saying no, but I think in the trades world specifically, there's a lot of guys that get themselves into those tough spots, and it's with good intentions, if that makes sense. It's never deliberate that you get in over your head and communication becomes poor, and now you're no longer doing great at whatever it is that you do, but most of the time it comes from the good intent of wanting to be able to help and solve everybody's problems.
Yeah.
And in the different clients that you have. So yeah, it is. I can understand that personal struggle at that time probably was tough.
Well, and we had come so far. You know what I mean? The team had grown so much and done so much that I didn't want to really take a step back, but kind of needed to evaluate the situation and see, where we were at as a business and where I was at as a person. Because ultimately it was kind of on my shoulders to figure out what we were going to do. Yep. So we did make the decision to not do 100% of that account. Now with that being said, there's always challenges to that. You've got somebody else coming in there, somebody else chirping in their ear and all these things like that, which we can weather that storm. It's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. So we took a step back. I think the next year we did like 1,000 houses, So it wasn't like
you just
didn't close the business.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think we did like right around 1,000 houses the next year. And then things just kind of, after the pandemic, things just kind of started to plateau out, and I think we did maybe 900, the year after that. And it's right now, last year we did, I think 694 houses. So it's
indicative of
we're
the market,
still a force,
yeah.
But the market obviously drives residential hugely. Yep. Do I think we could probably get more business if we wanted? Absolutely. I don't really say no to a lot, but also there's a limit to a certain extent on what you can and can't do, especially with the workforce.
And you guys have in that time period though, you guys have put I would say an intentional focus on, it's not always can we do more, but can we do better, right?
Yes,
and
100%.
And so I've personally like firsthand seen some of the things that you guys have implemented in the last couple of years that I think are exciting, and maybe that's what some of those moments do is when things do plateau or maybe regress a little bit. It gives you some time to reflect and see where you can improve.
I 100% agree with that, and 100% the whole point of that was we needed to not do more but do better, like you said. Yeah, it's great to do a lot, but I really wanted to focus more. We might have made a few hires that were not desirable just because we needed to fill the seat and have somebody on those jobs. And so we kind of did an assessment, an evaluation of the department, of the team, and said, okay, who is really part of this team that gets it, or who is just here, complains every day, and doesn't want to be part of the team. But you needed them because you had a customer who needed a house wired. And so, and that probably happened, part of 2022 and 23, really evaluated a lot of that. And I feel like we have a really, really good group of guys right now. You're always going to have one person everybody has a bad day.
Yeah. And I think that's just fair. It's just human nature and dealing with humans for sure.
Yeah. So,
but to have I talk about culture so much because it's important to me, but I do, that's something that I think about daily is, are there outside circumstances that are potentially poisoning our culture? And what are those? And is it things that maybe I'm getting us into that are not healthy for the staff that we have? Or
correct.
Am I trying to take this thing in a direction that does not make sense for how we're staffed or how we look as a company right now? And so, because it can be like some outside noise, or if you have a bad egg or bad apple or whatever, like in the group, it can really, really make things just kind of have a negative feel when it's like, gosh, it shouldn't, and so,
right.
Yeah.
I definitely think that that's been a pretty big point of focus for us over the last few years. We do a traction. Have you ever heard of traction before?
Yeah.
Set rocks. Yeah. We do that process. We've been doing that process for quite a few years.
Craig Toole implemented that when I had Todd Sommerfeld on. He talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
It had a really cool impact.
It started off with kind of the top management doing traction. Then we've, trickled down to project managers, and, our field employees don't do traction really at all because it's not part of their
time commitment.
It's not,
too.
Yeah. So, but we started focusing on things like that. The culture, big time, putting the right people in the right seat is one of our things that's always on the bottom of my traction thing, is putting the right people in the right seat. Is this person doing what they should be doing? Or is their job too much for them, or is it not challenging enough? So
that's tough. Like, because right people, right seats it is so crucial. And if you find yourself asking something of somebody that they're either like not equipped to handle that scenario that you're asking them to take care of, or you find out, like, have you gotten into scenarios where you found out that like I made a mistake? What I wanted, this person was never going to be able to fulfill.
Yes.
And where you almost feel like it's kind of on you, like, God, I fucked that up a little bit.
That has happened. Not a lot, but a few times where, it's kind of one of those situations where you can't want it more than they do. And sometimes I feel that way because I will look at an individual and be like, you're so capable of doing this. Like, this is not outside of your wheelhouse. Like, you can do this. But then in their mind, they're going, I don't think I can do this, or I don't want to do this. And after a certain point of you trying to build them up to be able to do that, you kind of have to just take a step back and be like, okay, this is not the right fit for you. We're going to make a change. It hasn't happened a lot, but it has happened a couple of times. And it's not just within myself, our entire organization operates that way, where Shane's a person who always wants everyone to become the best that they can and always go to that next level. No matter who you are, you could be the first year apprentice. He's like, I want you to be the president of the company someday. You know what I mean? That's what he wants for every individual. But that individual might not want that.
Yeah, but I think I love that. I love the idea of that's just fundamentally how you're going to approach. Like, I think if that's fundamentally how you're going to approach every interaction, then when it doesn't happen, it's okay. But by doing that, you allow yourself the ability to find that one person that may end up being that guy. If you approach everybody like you're a grunt and you're going to be a grunt forever, then you're never going to have that one shine through.
I feel like that was part of, that's the biggest value that I see from becoming part of this team was I came here as just a guy who installs wire, pulls wire, and does things, I probably in my own mind didn't know where I would be or what I could do, but my wife and Shane were like, dude, you can do so much more, and they recognized that and gave me the opportunity. And once I had that opportunity, I feel like I kind of seized it and did everything I could with that opportunity. I appreciate that a lot because at the end of the day, like I've told a million people this, not a million people, 1,000 people this, I'm just an electrician. I came into this thing as an electrician with no knowledge on how to write a schedule, estimate jobs, manage people, which is the hugest part of your day is just managing the people. I had no idea how to do that and no training on how to do that. You just kind of start to figure it out, I guess. So
Yeah, you do. I mean, just out of pure necessity. And I think, but having the willingness though, I mean, there's so many traits that a person can have that can be applicable to different facets of the business. And you may have started as just an electrician, but by showing up on day one with the eagerness to just fill in and work and do what was needed, I mean, that transcends then over to the other areas of the business. If being a leader of people is needed in the business, somebody needs to fill that role. And if you sell that mentality of like, I'll do sort of whatever it takes, then I think that's pretty special that, like it worked for you as an electrician and pulling wire, but also works for you in other areas. So,
yeah.
And there's so many of those, I don't know, a lot of that you can't teach, right? A lot of that people either have or don't. And to your point, some people just do not want to move up into those roles. And I think that's okay as well. You just have to sort of be self-aware enough, I guess, to know what you want.
I've talked several times to, well, not, I mean, so like we have an HR team, and like the head of HR is like, okay, so we did a lot of evaluation of positions in the last year, like creating roles and what these roles are and what
Redefining and
it wasn't really redefining. It was actually just defining.
okay.
It was basically just saying like, what is this job? What is this person's role? What is this job? What is this person's role? And in so doing so, I kind of had to self-reflect on what my role was and how someone else could do it. And I told them, I said, the biggest problem with some of these higher up roles is a lot of it's instinct. And I can't teach instinct. Like I can't teach, you can always teach somebody how to follow a process, or follow a formula or wire a house. You can teach that because it's just a process. When it comes to instinct, it's so many different things. It's how you react to situations, how you assess situations, things of that nature. Because somebody might just be coming at you yelling and screaming, and your instinct could be to yell and scream back, but at the end of the day, you're not going to get anything out of that.
Yeah, I think my take on that is to your point, if you're going to go wire a house, here's the steps that you need to follow. Here's the checklist of when you're done to double check these things to make sure your punch out is done appropriately. But if a client is unhappy and is bringing concerns to you, how are you going to handle that? If another vendor you guys work with, or if a contractor that you guys are doing work for is unhappy, how are you going to handle that? And I think it is interesting, and I'm always sort of like being self-critical in those moments because you sort of just find yourself there and you're just figuring it out, I guess.
Right.
Because to your point, like I didn't go to school how to handle a client that is unhappy either,
No.
But I think for me, I guess just I want to relate to that a little bit is I've always just kind of based it like as long as I operate on the premise of we always want to do everything we can to make sure a client is satisfied, or that like my biggest thing is I don't want to separate ways with you having a bad taste in your mouth. And you're not always going to keep everybody happy, but if I feel like I did everything that I could on behalf of Showtime Homes to it's not always financial, but like fix the downspout that we stepped on, or just whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Like just if I feel like we've done everything in our power that we can do to make the situation right or to take care of people, then at least I feel good about it,
right.
And we can kind of move on. So
yeah, I mean, there's multiple times where, you'll have a customer and they call you and they're like, we got to get this done. This has to be done, yada, yada, yada. And there might be 10 reasons in the back of your mind where you feel like it's their fault that it's not done or couldn't be done or whatever. But you can't, a lot of individuals will jump right to that and say, well, we're not done because you didn't have the bulkheads framed. The basement wasn't framed when we were there, X, Y, and Z. Well, in my mind, I'm like, we know that that's a problem, but by bringing that up, you're not creating a solution. So in my mind, I'm always like, what is the solution to this problem, no matter how big or how small it may be? Because that happens daily. You know, superintendents will call and be like, hey, I need you to come do this. Well, why wasn't it done when we were there before? Or whatever the situation may be. Hey, I need you to come hang this light fixture. Well, we were just there 10 minutes ago. Well, the light fixture just showed up. Can we do it tomorrow? You know, there's always a conversation that can be had, and that conversation doesn't always have to be pointing a finger. Yeah. Even if they're pointing the finger at you, they're your customer. Without them, you have no business. So you have to, within reason, have these conversations. And it happens a lot. I see it within my own project managers a lot of times where or they'll bring because I've always told them, like, if you need to vent, come to me. Come to me. You know,
That's
come
a big
to me.
One. That's a big one.
Come to me. Like,
because they're in the fire all the time.
Yes.
And I mean, I have to remind myself of that sometimes with even our small staff, is that, because I typically only get brought into a situation if it's either really good, which I mean does happen,
yes,
or it's bad.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself sometimes that, like, they're in the fire every day. And so there's going to be times where maybe they say something that they shouldn't have.
Correct.
Or treated a situation, it's not indicative of who they are as a person. It just, in that moment, might have handled it in a less than desirable way. And
when you don't always know what happened before.
Right.
Like, they could have had 4 phone calls in a row and it was a mad person. That 4th person calls them and they're just finally like, come on, man. Right. But you still have to maintain your composure. And I've told all of them, like, hey, you can bring your problems to me, because it might not be the customer. It might be the employees that are working for them. You never know what the situation is. And so I've kind of prided myself on being that, wasn't always like this. I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah. 5 years ago, probably wasn't quite like this, but I've always kind of prided myself, in recent years, of being able to diffuse a situation and kind of find common ground and be like, okay, it's kind of like if your kids are fighting, you're like, okay, so she pulled your hair and he hit you, but what did you say to him to make the, you know what I mean? Like,
I was literally just talking to Brian McMurray with Vista Real Estate yesterday. We had a meeting, and we were talking about, he just had his 4th, and just how, and we have 3 at home, and
yep,
and just how chaotic it can be. And I told him, I said, it's funny how being a dad or being a parent has changed my perspective from a professional standpoint of just like that. Like, there's, you think you're ready to go out the door and they don't like the shoes they have on at that moment. And so you face, like, you might be running 5 minutes late, but you have to just chill out, take that time to just change the shoes maybe, or whatever. Right. Yeah. And I think it makes me better at a professional level, just because you're able to kind of just deal with those things on the fly.
I will say I agree with that, but I will also say that I was very fortunate to have the partner who basically raised our children for me, because at the time that my kids were small, I worked nonstop. Like, I would work literally, some weeks I would just like take a Sunday off, but I would work 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., come home, eat supper, then go back out to work till 10. I did that for probably 2.5, 3 years straight, and just took Sundays off, just because, I don't know, I didn't want our children to ever worry about anything, and maybe to a fault of my own, because now they're grown. I have a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old, and they kind of just think that sometimes things just happen. And I'm like, no, and they're learning. Don't get me wrong. They understand. They all have jobs. They're going to school. They're doing their stuff. They understand that things cost money, but
how do you make it easy but not too easy? Still teach them lessons,
yes,
but not make them have to live through the bullshit.
It's a fine line. And my wife did an amazing job, raising my children. I'm not gonna lie to you. She doesn't think that she doesn't feel like she has value sometimes. I'm like, you have no idea the value you have. Yeah. Like, your value is,
you literally helped shape 3
priceless.
Humans.
It's priceless. Like, there's you couldn't pay someone to do what you've done for us for, the last 20 years of our relationship. And
well, I think that's, as guys, sometimes I think that's our way to, like, compensate too, is, like, I mean, the things that my wife does at home, and our kids, like, still, if there's certain aspects of their life that if they need something, they definitely want to go to mom.
Oh, 100%.
And it's like, I can't fill that void, so I guess I got to go over here and do this, so it's.
I completely agree. I mean, we kind of almost had that 1950s life. You know what I mean? Like, I went to work. Like, I couldn't even tell you who my kid's dentist is, who their doctor is. Like, and she she gives me a hard time. And I'm like, I just don't know. Like,
I remember a moment, it was right after I'd started Showtime, that we were at like a small get together with some other people, and they asked what the name of the elementary school that my stepdaughter at the time went to. And like, we had just moved down probably 8 months prior to the area we were in. And like, I didn't even know the name. I was like, it's over off of this street.
Yeah.
And they're like, you don't even know the name.
I know where the drop off lane
sorry.
is.
Not 100% proud of that, but
Yeah.
also at the same time, I only have so much mental capacity. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not 100% proud of it either, but it just kind of was one of those things where it was just out of necessity in life. That's what we had to do. And I was just very fortunate to have somebody who was like, here's the deal. We're a team. This is my job. This is your job. Yeah. Yes, I don't get paid a salary to do my job, but it's more important, technically speaking, to me than what my job was, Right. So you can't just go, oh, I don't like these kids anymore. Let's go get some new ones. Yep. If you don't like this job, you can always try and find a different one.
100%.
So
one thing I wanted to, knowing you were going to come on, I wanted to talk about specifically or ask you about was when I, like, having gotten to know you guys in the last couple of years, being around Shane, but being around yourself and Eric Carpenter and different people within Kline's team, the sort of like, it's just a natural feeling I get is that you guys are like, there's a genuine, like, care behind what you do. You want to do a good job, but you can tell that you're sort of enjoying it even when it's not enjoyable. There's this element to you guys that is a little bit different, and it's not all just Shane. It's people that have been there for however many
Sure.
number of years, but have key roles within your company. And what do you think is like one of the number one contributors to that? Like when you're at a Klein appreciation event, like, I mean, people are smiling and carrying on, and like I don't know, you can just tell that there's passion behind what you do, I guess. And what do you think one of the biggest contributors to that is?
I think there's multiple contributors, but I think one of the biggest ones is Shane throughout most of this process has been pretty transparent. I think that, and I don't know if that's the biggest factor, but as far as for me, the transparency that he's had with
Just
a lot of us,
being a human.
just being a human, discussing things with the business that maybe when we weren't 100% employee owned, he wouldn't have to, but he did, just because he wanted us to feel like we were part of it, back when in 2015, I think it was 2015, 15 or 16, when he had announced to us, it was 16. He announced to us that we were going to be employee owned. Prior to that, he had asked the management team, what do you want out of this? Like, what do you want out of this? Like, you guys are, you're on this level within this organization. What do you want? Like, when you retire from this company, tell me what you want, And so we all wrote on a piece of paper, no names or anything, just kind of feedback for him, And my biggest thing was I want some kind of stock. When I started working here, there was 19 employees, and now there's at that time probably 150 maybe. And I was like, I feel like I helped grow this and become the business that it is. So I would like to have some kind of valuation in that stock or whatever, something like, at that time I didn't know what an ESOP really was, Yeah. And so he took that, and figured out everything to do to make it employee owned, and then announced it when we took a trip to Vegas as a management team because we hit like a revenue goal, and we went to the Wynn, and we're in a conference room in the Wynn with, I think it was us and our wives, our spouses were there, and he just basically said, starting in 2017 or 16, whatever, we're gonna become 100% employee owned, and what that means is you guys are gonna all own stock in this company, and every employee that's within this company will also own stock. I basically have sold the company to you guys. So for me, that was a huge deal. He announced at the Christmas party after, he told us first and announced at the Christmas party. I cried. I'm not gonna lie to you. We all kind of got emotional. It was just a big thing because he did not have to do that, But his whole thing was, I don't want to be going to Walmart when I'm retired and see a former employee of mine being a greeter at Walmart because they didn't have enough retirement of their own to retire from this, this trade. And so that was part of the transparency from me in the beginning. I was committed already, but after that stage of it, I was super committed to it. And I think a lot of the young employees don't see that. I'm going off subject. I'm sorry. I think a lot of the young employees probably don't see the value in that a lot, but they've never worked for a company where it's like, the owner lives in this big shiny. Not that Shane, he lives in a nice house. He's got a nice house, built a nice house. He's got a lot of nice stuff, but he also has given all of us the keys to the castle as well, So I think transparency is a huge reason why a lot of us have that good demeanor. And, we've been friends for all of us have kind of been friends for a long time, we weren't really friends before we worked at Klein, but since we've started working at Klein, we've developed relationships. And I'm not saying we go out to dinner with our families every night in the week, but
it's important to enjoy those that you have to go into battle with every day. I mean, enjoying their company that's extremely important for sure.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the people, and even the young people, like last year we did a deal where we had the skybox for the Cubs. And so it was I was like, we have all these games we need to go to. So I challenged my residential team to basically take every single employee. I went to every single game that I asked them to go to, or if they wanted to go to. You had a few that didn't want to go or whatever, which is no big deal. But I really wanted to spend that time with, because I have guys that work on the residential team that maybe I talk to 4 times a year, just because I don't see them every day. Like I might be out in the shop every morning, but they might not be coming to the shop. They may be going to the job. So I wanted to have that opportunity to, and Carpenter went with, and we all just we're all humans, talk to them, make them feel like a person instead of an employee. I feel like that helps a lot with the buy-in of this is a good company to work for, makes them, think twice before wanting to go somewhere else or whatever the situation may be, because you just have to show a tiny bit of care. It doesn't take much. You just, a little bit goes a long ways with individuals. Guys off from maternity leave. How's the baby?
Yeah.
Just these little things, like you just
giving a shit goes a long way.
You just have to care a little bit. And I think that goes a long ways. It's not always about, well, when are you coming back? Or what do you, I don't know. It's just treat them like humans.
Well, I love that. That's a good answer and a good way to explain it. And transparency from leadership down, whether it's Shane to you guys or you guys to the rest of the employees that you have under you, I think, just the ability to step back and be human, but also understand there's a job to do it's a tricky balance, and not everybody's good at it. So, I mean, I think it's cool that it reflects from you guys that you're obviously doing some things right, for sure.
I think that, in the beginning, I think we always called it team building, because it was kind of like the thing, like, oh, we're going to go on a snowball trip, but it's team building, and a lot of us who have been there a long time have gone on these trips and done this stuff. We don't do near as much as we used to do, just because we're such a big organization now, and you don't have the time or the,
allocating resources is a little bit harder.
It's just different, so I think a lot of that created that core of the core group. And sometimes I think in Shane's mind, he's like, man, I want to do more of that. Like, I want to take these guys and do these things, and gals and whatever, and do these things. But again, it's time. It's them away from the place, It's just, there's a lot to it. I mean, Shane is hands down the fun guy. Right. Like, he wants to have fun with every situation. Now, obviously, there's certain times where he has to be the president of the company and kind of not be the fun guy. But 99% of the time, he's like, we're going to go do this. We're going to figure out how to make it fun, which is great. I'm like, no, let's just go do it and get it done. I don't really care if it's fun, but he really likes to have fun. I mean, like I said, I was on a Q&A panel for the DISC assessment that we did, 2 weeks ago or whatever. And we were up in this panel. These guys were asking us all these questions, and I pat them on the back and go, I will tell you right now, guys, this is the first boss I've ever had in my entire life who will come into my office and say, hey, can you stop working for a little bit so we can go do something fun?
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, no, I need to get this done. He's like, can't you just do it tomorrow? And I'm like, no, I got to get this done. You don't find that very often with the president of the company saying, hey, stop for a second. Let's go do something fun.
Right.
Yeah,
you got to live a little too. Is there anything else that you want to add? Just, whether it's directly on topic that we're talking about right now or not. I mean, I think, I mean, there's a lot of aspects to that story that I had no idea about. So I think we could set like 2 or 3 other episodes probably to dive into certain other aspects. But
I can go into the weeds,
yeah,
not intentionally, but there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's changed within the organization in, 15, 16
yeah.
years, a lot,
I think one of the most powerful things that stands out to me, though, of listening to that journey is that moment when your buddy was asking you go to work for Des Moines Waterworks.
sure.
I think it's an internal struggle that happens to a lot of people when you either outgrow sort of the current position you're at within the company that you're with, or you sort of become, I don't know. I think it's easy to feel like undervalued once you feel like you're just really kicking the shit out of whatever you're doing. If you're crushing day to day whatever you're doing, I think it's easy to get that as the grass is greener feeling.
Yeah.
And maybe it comes from outside influence. Maybe it comes from just seeing other people doing different things. And so, but it's like, what if I change my demeanor or find different ways within the company that I'm at currently to like further my cause too? Like, is that possible? If it's not, maybe I do need to move. But I think that moment, and then obviously that text came like within that next week and was like,
Yeah,
let's go. But
it was I don't know. I sometimes think things happen for a reason.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Big believer in that.
I'm not a huge, how do I want to say this? Like, I'm not a person who thinks that like your sign is anything that matters for you. I'm not that kind of guy, but I think that karma's real. I think that if you do good things happen to you. If you do bad things happen to you. I completely agree with that. Now, that's just my opinion, just because based upon life experiences I've had. I also feel like, I don't want to say prophesizing, but speaking things into existence. Like if you talk about things and you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Now, obviously you can't be like, oh, tomorrow I'm going to go become Jeff Bezos.
It's the power of the mind, though.
It changes things. So I think that maybe deep down inside, I did not want to leave Kline Electric. I had no intentions of really wanting to leave, but I was talking to this buddy, and I went and did the interview process. I did a lot of stuff, and I don't think I've ever even told Shani this stuff, but I did the interview process. I mean, if there's a really good chance that I would have gone and done that had the other service thing not come up, just because you reach a certain point within your career where you feel like you're not recognized for what you're doing or what you're worth, And so you're like, okay, is this the right thing? Should I be doing something different? And sometimes it may only take a situation. Like I probably could have gone and talked to Shane and told him that I felt this way at the time. And I'd only been working for the company for maybe 2 years, 3 years. I probably could have gone and talked to him and been like, time out. Let's have a complete evaluation of this. Like, what do you want? What do you need? But I didn't really feel comfortable with the situation at that time to do that, but I probably could have, and it would have changed that way. Now obviously things are different.
Yeah,
but,
you know that now, sort of looking back.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
it's easy for that door to prop open just a little bit, though, and all of a sudden doubt starts creeping in, and it's
100%.
Like, should I be doing this, or fuck, should I even be an electrician?
Right.
And like you
100%.
You start questioning things a little bit.
Yeah, I completely, and it happens even if you feel like you've reached, I don't want to say, the pinnacle of your career, or you're up here. That can still happen to you. 100%. Like you might have a bad day and think, man, do I even want to do this anymore? It'd be so much easier if I could go do this. Well, but would it be?
Yeah. Or am I just going to be faced with a new set of challenges?
It's a new set of challenges, and it might be a new set of problems all over again, and then you're back to square one.
Yeah.
So 9 times out of 10, if you've been comfortable in a situation for a long time, I use comfortable loosely, but if the situation feels good 90% of the time, in that 10%, you just got to kind of deal with it, and move on and grow from it, I guess is what I would say. So
hell yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it was, I'm glad that you took some time to come share your story, at least through that. I do think that we could certainly have another, I felt like that really summarizes kind of that direction of the feeling that you guys have as a company and culture. I think for people to understand that may interact with you, like how you got started with the company, the fact that you got laid off during the during the crisis, if you will,
Yeah.
of 08, 09, and just like what that all means. And the reason why I like doing this in a nutshell is just to see you in passing. How are things doing? Things are great. How's business? Business is booming.
Yeah.
You just don't know shit about the person
Right.
that you're dealing with,
Yeah.
you know? And it's so fun to just take the time to sit down and learn a little bit more about someone's past and history within the company or personally, and just it really adds perspective, but it's also so applicable to other shit that you have going on too that it's
Yeah.
cool. So
No, this was,
yeah.
like I said, I'm kind of a talker.
Yeah.
My wife always makes fun of me. She's like, we can't go anywhere together. I'm like, why not? She's like, you'll see somebody you know, and then we have to
Right.
talk to them for 30 minutes. And I'm like, well, you can't just ignore them. She's
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, you could just pretend like you didn't see them. And I'm like, no. Especially
Right.
Ankeny is like the worst. She's like, we don't go to, don't go to dinner in Ankeny. We don't shop a lot in Ankeny because
Yeah.
I always run into somebody I know. But that's just kind of
Yeah.
how I am. Or like I'll recognize somebody. We were driving down 141 right after I had met you guys, and Sean rolls up in his Jeep.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know him. She's like, no, you don't. I go, yeah, I do. I'm like, roll your window down. She's like, I'm not rolling my window down. I'm like, no, dude, it's all good. And she's like, no, we're not doing this right now.
That's
He's sitting there
funny.
right next to me in his Jeep with his
Yeah.
top down,
Yeah.
and we're either in, I don't remember what we're driving or whatever. She's like, I'm like, I just want to say hey to him. She's like, no. And and then next time I see him, I'm like, hey man, you got a Jeep? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I saw you on 140. He's like, why didn't you say something? And I'm like,
Yeah.
because exactly,
Right.
So
yeah. No, it's fun. Every once in a while when he gets that thing out, I'm like, that's kind of like that Shane thing. I'll be like, are you busy right now? Let's go for a cruise in the
Yeah.
Jeep, because
Yeah.
it is fun seeing people when you're out about in that thing. But
yeah.
yeah, no, it's good. It's a good way to be in. If the Des Moines Metro is not, it's large, obviously, respectively to other cities. Maybe it's not that big, but nonetheless, it's small enough that,
Oh yeah.
it's important to operate in a certain way professionally, because out in the wild, man, you're going to run into people, and it might be an old client, and it might be a vendor that you used to work with. It might be an old employee, or you never know. So you gotta keep your house clean, I guess.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
You never know what could happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So
Amen. Well, thanks for coming in, man.
yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.